The amber plastic bottle of metformin felt slick in my hand. I shook 2 pills into my palm. The rattle, loud in the too quiet, sunlit kitchen. 8 a.m. With breakfast, the schedule was etched behind my eyelids. Eleanor's medication chart was my Bible, her needs the pendulum of my days. I heard his footsteps on the hardwood before I saw him. Chase, my husband, moved through his parents' spacious Atlanta home with a sense of breezy ownership that always stopped just short of actual responsibility. He went straight for the stainless steel coffee machine, the expensive one Hank bought that Chase had mastered. God, can't we ever open a window in here? He said, not looking at me. It always smells like antiseptic and despair. It smells clean. I said, my voice even. I placed the pills on a small saucer next to the oatmeal I'd cooked for Eleanor. Your mom had a good night. She was asking for you yesterday, he mumbled, engrossed in the espresso wand's hiss. He finally glanced over as he took his first sip. His eyes, a cool blue I once found mesmerizing, did a quick, dismissive sweep of me. Why faded yoga pants? The old Georgia Tech sweatshirt that was Hank's. My hair piled in a messy bun. No makeup. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours. You're wearing that today? He asked. Wearing what? Chase, it's 7:30. I'm not receiving ambassadors. I'm giving your mother a bath. You used to put in effort. Babe, even on a Sunday. He said it lightly, a casual observation, but the barb was perfectly aimed. It landed in the soft, tired part of me that still cared what he thought. It's a mindset. You let this situation consume you. I turned to face him, the oatmeal spoon gripped a little too tight. This situation is your mother, who is paralyzed, and consuming me is also called taking care of her. I'm just saying, there are professionals for that. Nice facilities, places where she'd get round-the-clock care, and we could, I don't know, have a life again. He leaned against the counter. The picture of reasonable suggestion. Dad's retirement could cover a good chunk of it. It's not like they're hurting for money. A shadow fell across the kitchen doorway. Hank stood there, a folded newspaper in his hand. I hadn't heard him approach. His face, usually warm and crinkled with ready smiles, was a placid mask, but his eyes, the same blue as Chase's, yet infinitely kinder and sadder, were fixed on his son. He didn't say a word. He just looked. Chase shifted under the gaze, a flicker of the boy being chastised crossing his features before the man brushed it away. Morning. Dad. Chase, Hank said, his voice a low rumble. He entered, poured himself a black coffee, and sat at the breakfast nook. The silence was heavy, accusatory. Chase cleared his throat. Gotta run. Big presentation today. Don't wait up. Might grab drinks with the team after. He pecked me on the cheek. A dry, perfunctory touch. Try to do something with yourself. Lila. Really. He was gone. The smell of his cologne and expensive coffee lingering, battling the scent of disinfectant and oatmeal. Hank sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to come from his shoes. I'm sorry, Lila. It's not your fault, I said automatically, arranging Eleanor's tray. It is, in a way. We made it too easy for him. The wanting. We confused with deserving. He took a slow sip. He doesn't see her. He sees a problem. He doesn't see you. He sees an inconvenience. Tears, stupid and sudden, pricked my eyes. Hank saw everything. He always had. It was both a comfort and a curse. He's stressed. Work is fine. His character is lacking. Hank said it plainly. A simple diagnosis. Eleanor is asking for you. I nodded, blinking the moisture away, and carried the tray down the hall to the sunroom we'd converted into a bright, first-floor bedroom. Eleanor Mitchell was propped up on a mountain of pillows, her silver hair a soft cloud around her thin face. The stroke had stolen the use of her right side and slurred her speech, but it had sharpened her eyes. They missed nothing. There's my girl, she said, the words slightly thick but clear. Her good hand, gnarled with arthritis, patted the duvet. Good morning. Beautiful. Oatmeal and berries. And your meds. I set the tray on the adjustable table and swung it over her lap. I sat on the edge of the bed to help her. She took a few bites, her movements slow and deliberate. Chase gone? She asked. Just left. Big day at work. She made a soft sound, a puffed air. Big baby. She looked at me, her gaze intense. You. Tired. I'm okay. No. She struggled, shifting. I adjusted the pillow behind her. Lila, listen. You, the daughter we wished for. Her good hand found mine and gripped it with surprising strength. Chase, he doesn't know how to love. Not the real way. He takes. He saw his father in me. He saw the fun, the vacations, the laughing. She took a ragged breath. He didn't see the work, the grit. Your grit, he doesn't see it. He just sees dirt under the nails. A lump formed in my throat. That was it. Exactly. Chase loved the idea of a perfect wife, a perfect life, the glossy outcome. He had no interest in the messy, unglamorous, daily work that built it. He'd seen his parents enviable, 50-year marriage, and assumed it was a birthright, not a construction. I thought of my own parents then, a flash of memory I usually kept locked away. My father, a ghost in his own recliner. My mother, her voice a constant critique, a checklist of my failures. Holidays were silent battles. Birthdays were obligations. I'd met Chase in college, and my first dinner at the Mitchells had felt like stepping into a warm bath. The easy teasing between Hank and Eleanor, the way Hank's hand rested on the small of her back as he passed her a dish, the way they finished each other's stories without malice. I'd been starved for that. I think I fell for the family before I truly fell for Chase. He was the key to that door. I love him, I whispered to Eleanor. A weak defense. She patted my hand. I know, sweetheart, but love shouldn't be a one-way rescue. She looked toward the doorway, where Hank now stood, leaning against the frame, listening. It should be a harbor, in a storm, for both. Her eyes fluttered, closed for a moment, the effort of the speech exhausting her. Don't get lost. Saving me. Later that afternoon, during Eleanor's physical therapy, she tired quickly and became frustrated, a tear of anger slipping down her cheek. Hank stepped in, his voice a gentle rumble. Easy now. Ellie, remember the Grand Canyon? You said you'd never make that hike. Too hot, too far. And then you left me in the dust. A faint smile touched her lips. You brought the wrong shoes. See, you remember. This is just a different canyon. We're just picking our way through it. Slow and steady. He took her frail hand in his two broad, work-roughened ones and simply held it. The frustration seeped out of her. That silent, wordless communication. The shared history that was a fortress against present pain, took my breath away. I wanted that. I'd ached for that my whole life. Chase came home late, as usual. Eleanor was sleeping. Hank was in his workshop in the garage. I was scrubbing a bedpan in the laundry room sink. My sleeves rolled up, my hands red. Smells like a hospital in here, he announced, dropping his briefcase. What's for dinner? There's leftover meatloaf in the fridge. Again, he sighed dramatically. Can't you ever make something that doesn't look like it's already been digested? The crudeness, the sheer oblivious selfishness of it, ignited something in me. I turned off the water. I've been giving your mother bed baths, changing her catheter bag, and trying to get her to eat enough calories so she doesn't waste away to nothing. Forgive me if gourmet cuisine slipped my mind today. There it is, he said, crossing his arms. The martyr act. You chose this, remember? Dad could afford 24-hour help. You insisted on playing the saint. I'm not playing. She's family. And she didn't want strangers doing the most intimate things for her. She wanted family. Well, I'm family, and the sight of it makes me sick. He shot back, his voice rising. You're covered in her in everything. You're married to this house and my parents, not to me. When was the last time we went out? When was the last time you looked at me like you wanted me, and not like I'm your next chore? The words were meant to wound, and they did. They found the deep, secret fear I carried, that in becoming a caregiver, I had ceased to be a wife, a woman. Someone has to be here. I yelled back, my composure shattering. Someone has to do the hard things. You just get to waltz in and out, complaining about the smell and the food. You haven't sat with her for more than 10 minutes in a week. She's your mother, Chase, and you're a glorified nurse. He spat, his face ugly with contempt, and not a very appealing one at the moment. Look at you. I froze. The cruelty, a physical blow. I saw movement in the hallway. Hank stood there, his face like granite. He didn't look at me. He stared at his son with a cold, crushing disappointment. You will not speak to her like that in this house, Hank said, his voice low and deadly calm. It wasn't a shout. It was an edict. Chase had the decency to flinch, but defiance quickly overrode it. He scoffed, a hollow sound. Your house? Please, it'll be mine soon enough. All of this. He gestured vaguely, encompassing the beautiful home, the cared-for lawn, the lifetime of accumulation and love. Then we'll see about the living arrangements, the bald entitlement, the casual mention of their deaths as a mere stepping stone to his comfort, sucked the air from the room. Even Chase seemed to realize he'd gone too far. He looked from his father's stony face to my horrified one, muttered, "Forget it," and stalked upstairs. The silence he left behind was vibrating. Hank walked over to me. I was trembling, the dirty bedpan forgotten in the sink. "I'm sorry, Lila," he said again, and this time it sounded like a lament for something much bigger than a nasty argument. He put a heavy, steadying hand on my shoulder. Some people, they only learn the weight of things by throwing them away. He didn't elaborate. He just squeezed my shoulder and walked back toward the sunroom to sit with his wife. I stood there in the laundry room, the clinical light glaring off the white tiles, the smell of bleach and bodily fluids in my nose, my husband's cruel words echoing in my head. I looked at my chapped hands, at the damp spot on my sweatshirt from the sink. I felt invisible and seen in the worst possible way. The foundation of my life, the one I thought I'd built on the solid rock of this family's love, didn't just have cracks. It was splitting right down the middle. And I was the only one who seemed to be falling into the chasm. Time, in a house of slow decline, becomes a strange, syrupy thing. It wasn't measured in birthdays or anniversaries, but in pill organizers refilled, in the cyclical beep of the feeding pump, in the gradual fading of the light in Eleanor's eyes, replaced by a weary, accepting calm. 2 years bled by, marked not by seasons, but by the slow motion erosion of my marriage and the even slower petrification of my own spirit. The arguments with Chase had lost their heat, their explosive quality. They'd settled into a cold, corrosive drip. "You're on your own for dinner," he'd say, texting from the driveway, already in his car, working late with the team. The lie was so thin it was transparent. Sometimes, a different, cloying perfume lingered on his collar. I stopped smelling it, or maybe I just stopped caring to notice. The night of the glorified nurse comment was a fracture point. After that, he didn't bother with the pretense of attraction. His disdain was a suit he wore at home. One Tuesday, I was in the kitchen, blending Eleanor's dinner, and nutrient-rich, slurry that always smelled vaguely of vitamins and defeat. I was still in the same clothes from a 3 a.m. bed change, my hair a frizzy halo. Chase came in, crisp in a tailored shirt, heading for the whiskey decanter. He looked me up and down, his lip curling. "You know, they have scrubs that are actually somewhat flattering. Or is the exhausted saint look part of the whole performance?" I didn't look up from the blender. "Your mother's puree is getting cold. Are you going to sit with her tonight? She asked for you." "What for?" he asked, pouring 2 fingers of bourbon. So she can drool and stare at the wall? So she can repeat the same slurred story about the PDA bake sale in 1987? It's depressing. Lila, it brings the whole house down. The coldness of it finally snapped something. I turned off the blender. The sudden silence was loud. She is not depressing. She is a human being. Your mother, who held you, and read to you, and loves you, loved me. He corrected, taking a sip. That person is gone. What's in that room is a shell, and you've dedicated your life to a shell. It's pathetic. Before I could even form a retort, a voice, gravelly with controlled fury, spoke from the hallway. Get out. Hank stood there, still in his work pants from the garage, a smear of grease on his knuckle. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at his son with a look I'd never seen before, not just anger, but a kind of profound, grieving disgust. Chase rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. Dad, don't be melodramatic. We're just talking. We're not talking. You are spewing poison, Hank said, his voice low and even. He took a step into the kitchen, and Chase, for all his bluster, took a subconscious half-step back. You will apologize to your wife. Now, Chase's face flushed. The defiance was back, mixed with a petulant rage. Or what? You'll cut me off? Go ahead. It's all going to be mine anyway. This house, the accounts, everything. You're just the caretaker. I'm the heir. He said it like he was stating a simple, biological fact. The sun rises. Taxes are due. He inherits. Hank didn't move. The silence stretched, thick and terrible. Finally, he said, you have a very high opinion of what you deserve, son, and a very low understanding of what it costs. He looked at me, his eyes softening for a fraction of a second. Lila, your mother's dinner. It was a dismissal. I picked up the tray, my hand shaking, and walked out. Chase's words air, caretaker, echoing in the hollow of my chest. I served Eleanor, helped her sip through the straw, my movements automatic. The sounds from the kitchen were muffled, just the low rumble of Hank's voice, a solitary, unyielding note. Chase's car started and screeched out of the driveway a few minutes later. Hank never came in to tell me what he'd said. He didn't need to. The finality in his posture had said it all. Eleanor died on a Thursday. It was peaceful, almost anticlimactic. Her breathing, which had been a shallow, raspy tide for weeks, just stilled. I was reading to her from a book of Southern poetry. Hank was holding her good hand, rubbing his thumb over her knuckles. 1 minute she was there. The next, she wasn't. The absence was immediate. A physical void in the sun-dappled room. I called Chase. It went to voicemail. I called again. On the third try, he answered, sounding irritated. What? I'm in a meeting. Chase, I said, my voice strangely calm. It's your mom. She's gone. A pause. A sharp intake of breath that sounded more like surprise than grief. I'm on my way. He arrived 40 minutes later. His grief, when he entered the room, was a performance, a convincing one. If you didn't know him, he knelt by the bed, took her limp hand, said, "Oh, Mom," but his eyes were dry. He stayed like that for a respectable minute, then stood, wiping non-existent tears from his cheeks. He looked at his father, who hadn't moved from his vigil. "Dad, I'm so sorry." Hank just nodded, his gaze never leaving Eleanor's face. The funeral was a blur of casseroles and murmured condolences. Chase was in his element at the bereaved son, stoic and handsome in his dark suit, accepting hugs, telling sanitized, funny stories about Eleanor. I saw him check his phone during the pastor's eulogy, a quick, discreet glance at the screen, his thumb scrolling. A bolt of pure, white-hot rage shot through me, burning away the numbness. I looked at Hank. He'd seen it too. His jaw was clenched so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. A week after we buried her, the house felt like a tomb haunted by the ghost of routine. I'd still wake at 4 a.m., listening for the monitor. The silence was deafening. Chase came home early. He was wearing a new shirt, one I hadn't seen. He smelled of expensive cologne, not the funeral home flowers that still lingered in the living room. "We need to talk," he said, his voice all business. He gestured to the living room sofa, the one Eleanor had loved. "Sit." I Saturday feeling like a defendant. He remained standing, pacing a little. "Lila, this isn't working." "Us." "It hasn't been for a long time." I stared at him, the words not quite computing. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that we're strangers," he said, spreading his hands. "We have been for years. You've been my parents' caretaker, not my wife. We have nothing in common anymore. No shared interests. No spark. My mother just died." I whispered, the words scraping my throat. "And that's tragic," he said, not sounding tragic at all. "But it closes a chapter. It frees us both to be honest. I want a divorce." The word landed in the quiet room with the force of a physical blow. Divorced, I looked past him, to the archway that led to the hall. Hank was there, a shadow in the dim light. He'd heard. Our eyes met. In his, I saw oceans of sorrow, of apology, but also a frightening, unwavering stillness. He didn't move. He didn't speak. "Hank?" The name, the plea, tore out of me. "Please?" Chase turned, startled, then shrugged as if his father's presence was irrelevant. Hank looked from his son to me. The silence stretched, agonizing. Finally, he spoke, his voice a dry rustle. "It's between you two," he said. Then, as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders, he turned and disappeared down the hall towards his workshop. The last pillar of my world crumbled to dust. I was alone, completely, utterly alone. "See," Chase said, a note of vindication in his voice. "Even he knows it's over. It's for the best. Lila, we've grown apart. It's irreconcilable differences." I looked at this man, this stranger I'd loved, for whom I'd given up everything. I saw the impatience in his stance, the calculation in his eyes. This wasn't about grief or growing apart. This was about a nuisance being removed. His mother was gone. His father was old. And I, the glorified nurse, was no longer required. I was a piece of the old, messy life he was ready to shed. "You're leaving me," I said, the statement flat. "Now, after everything, I'm freeing us both." He corrected, his tone gentle now, the practiced tone of a man letting his secretary down easy. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'll be fair. You can stay here until it's finalized. I've got a place lined up in Midtown." The planning, the cold, efficient forethought of it all. He'd been planning this while his mother was dying. While I was holding her hand, he was looking at apartments. I had no fight left. The well was dry. I just nodded. A numb, mechanical movement. "Okay." He looked surprised, then pleased, as if he'd expected more drama. "Okay, good. It's for the best." He walked over, as if to pat my shoulder, then thought better of it. "I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers." He left the room, whistling a little tune. I sat on the sofa his mother had picked out, in the house that had become my prison and my sanctuary, and I felt nothing at all. Just a vast, echoing silence where my heart used to be. Hank's words echoed in the void. "It's between you two," the final, absolute betrayal. The harbor I thought I had was just a mirage. The storm was here, and I was drowning, and no one was coming to throw a rope. The divorce was not a clean break. It was a slow, methodical dismemberment, conducted in beige-walled offices and over our once-shared kitchen table, with a language of its own. Petition, response, discovery, marital asset, separate property. The words were sterile, surgical, designed to drain the blood and pain from the process and leave only dry, divisible bones. Chase's fairness arrived 3 days after his pronouncement, in a thick envelope from his lawyer, Markham Pierce, LLC. I sat at the dining table, the same one where we'd shared holiday meals with Hank and Eleanor. and read the dry, legalese version of my worth. He's offering a lump sum, I said to Hank, who was silently drinking coffee across from me. My voice sounded strange in my ears. From our joint savings, a generous lump sum. It says. Hank looked up from his mug. How generous. I told him the figure. It was about a third of the balance. A balance that was mostly Chase's money anyway, because my income had been caring for his mother. Hank's expression didn't change, but a small muscle in his jaw tightened. And in return, I waive all claims to his 401k, his investment portfolio, the appreciation on his vintage Jaguar he never drives. I kept reading, a cold numbness spreading through me. He gets the furniture from the apartment we shared before we moved in here. He's asking for the silverware set, the one your mother gave us for our wedding. Hank set his mug down with a quiet clink. The Reed Barton, your grandmother's. I nodded, a hysterical laugh bubbling in my throat. He was leaving me, discarding me like a used tissue. But he wanted the fucking salad forks. My own lawyer, a weary-looking woman named Brenda from Legal Aid, sighed when I showed her the papers in her cramped, paper-filled office a week later. Ms. Mitchell, Lila, given your financial circumstances, and current income, no substantial assets of your own prior to the marriage. It's a standard opening offer. It's not great, but it's a starting point. We can counter for alimony, given the duration of the marriage and your role as a caregiver. You'd have a case. I don't want alimony, I said, the words automatic. I just wanted it to be over. The fight had been bled out of me. Brenda gave me a long, pitying look. You should want alimony. It's not a handout. It's compensation for years of unpaid labor that directly contributed to his ability to maintain his career. You kept his home. You cared for his family. That has value. I thought of the bedpans, the 2 a.m. terrors, the pureed meals, the slow erosion of myself. How do you put a price on that? We let the state guidelines do it, she said, not unkindly, but it's a process. And he's dug in. His counsel is digressive. Aggressive was an understatement. The negotiation sessions, when they happened, were masterclasses in dehumanization. Chase's lawyer, a slick man named Pierce, referred to me as the dependent spouse and talked about my voluntary withdrawal from the workforce, as if caring for a dying woman was a spa vacation I'd chosen. Chase and I met once, alone, at the house. Hank had made himself scarce. It was a tactical error on my part. You look tired. Lila, Chase said, not sitting. He was surveying the living room, his eyes cataloging, appraising. You should take the deal. Get a fresh start. A fresh start with a third of our savings and no silverware. I asked, my arms crossed. He had the decency to look slightly abashed, but only for a second. It's an heirloom. It should stay in the family. I was your family. That's debatable, legally speaking, he said, and the coldness was back. Look, I'm trying to be decent here. I'm letting you stay in the house until it's final. That's more than most guys would do. Letting? I echoed. This isn't your house. Chase, it's your father's. A smug smile touched his lips. Semantics. And temporary ones. Pierce says the alimony play is a long shot. You have no recent work history. The judge will see you as capable. You're what, 34? You can go back to waitressing or whatever. He said it so casually, wiping out 6 years of my life, reducing it to, or whatever. I took care of your dying mother, and we're all very grateful, he said, his tone dismissive. But that was your choice. It doesn't entitle you to a lifetime of my paycheck. Take the lump sum. Lila, it's clean. You can get a little apartment. Take some classes. Maybe meet someone who doesn't mind the baggage. His eyes flicked over me, taking in my worn jeans, my lack of polish. The message was clear. You're damaged goods now. I thought of Hank, sitting silently in his workshop night after night. The sound of sanding would a constant, low hum through the house. He offered no advice, no comfort. He just existed, a monument to inaction. My last fragile hope that someone in this family would see the injustice, would stand up and say this is wrong, was crumbling to dust. One evening, after a particularly galling letter from Pierce arguing that the marital standard of living was irrelevant because we'd been living with his parents, I finally snapped. I found Hank in the garage, carefully clamping a piece of walnut to his workbench. The smell of sawdust and linseed oil filled the air. "Why won't you help me?" The question burst out of me, raw and ragged. "You saw everything. You know what he's doing. Why won't you say anything? Why won't you tell him to stop being such a selfish bastard?" Hank didn't flinch. He kept his eyes on the wood, running a finger along a grain. "Some lessons. Lila," he said, his voice quiet. "A man has to learn for himself. The hard way. You can't teach character. You can only reveal the lack of it. So you're just going to let him steamroll me? To take everything and leave me with nothing? After everything I did for Eleanor? For you?" My voice cracked. I thought you cared about me." That got his attention. He looked up, and his eyes, usually so clear, were clouded with a pain so deep it made me catch my breath. "I care more than you can possibly know," he said. Each word weighted. "But this is his road, and it's yours, right now. You have to walk it alone. You have to see the path for yourself. Before anyone can point the way." It was riddles. It was maddening. What does that even mean? He's going to take everything. And you're talking in proverbs. "I'm talking about the law," Hank said, turning back to his clamp, his tone final, "and the truth, and patience. The three don't always move at the same speed." He wouldn't say another word. I left him there, surrounded by the beautiful, silent things he was building, while my life was being dismantled. The final court date was a blur of muted colors and echoing voices. A cavernous, impersonal room. The judge, a woman with tired eyes and a steely gray bun, listened to Pierce list my non-monetary contributions as if reading a grocery list. Brenda argued for alimony, her voice passionate, but I could feel, ultimately futile against the cold. Hard facts of my empty resume and Chase's solid salary. The judge's gavel came down. The divorce was granted. The settlement was, with minor adjustments, exactly what Chase had first offered. The lump sum, no alimony. He got the silverware. He got the car. He got to walk away clean, outside the courthouse, under a flat, gray Atlanta sky. Chase looked relieved, unburdened. He adjusted the cuff of his expensive shirt. I meant what I said. "Lila, take care of yourself. Really." He didn't offer a handshake. He just nodded, turned, and walked to his shiny, newly detailed Jaguar. He didn't look back. I stood on the steps, the final decree feeling like a death certificate in my hand. Brenda patted my arm, said something about moving forward, and hurried off to her next case. I was alone, truly, legally, devastatingly alone. I took a cab back to the house, Hank's house. It didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a waiting room I'd overstayed in. Hank's truck was in the driveway. I walked in, the silence a physical presence. He was in his armchair, not reading, just staring out the window at the bird feeder Eleanor had loved. "It's done," I said, my voice hollow. He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. Lila." "Yeah," I said. There was nothing else. No rage. No tears. Just a vast, empty exhaustion. "I'll start packing. I'll be out by the weekend." My friend Sarah said I could couch surf for a while. I went upstairs to the room Chase and I had shared. It already felt like a guest room. I pulled my old, half-empty suitcase from the closet. I started with the practical things, underwear, socks, a few pairs of jeans. The act of folding, of placing items into a bag, felt surreal. This was it. 6 years, a marriage, a death, a betrayal, all of it, reduced to what could fit in a 28-inch rolling suitcase and a duffel bag. I opened my jewelry box, a cheap, lacquered thing from my own mother. Inside was the simple pearl necklace Hank and Eleanor had given me for my first Christmas with them. I held it, the cool beads smooth against my skin. A daughter of the heart. She'd called me. It felt like a lifetime ago, a story about someone else. Downstairs, I heard the low murmur of the television. Hank was watching the news. Life, incomprehensibly, was going on. I zipped the suitcase closed. The sound was final. It was the sound of the end of everything. The silence in the Mitchell house after Eleanor's funeral wasn't peaceful. It was accusatory. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, a relic Hank refused to part with, felt like a judgment. You're still here. Why are you still here? I moved through the rooms like a ghost, half expecting to see her in her chair by the window, a skein of wool in her lap. Her absence was a physical weight, a hollowed-out space that echoed with memories of her soft, slurred voice and the faint scent of lavender and menthol. My own grief was a tangled, complicated thing. I mourned Eleanor fiercely, a deep, aching sorrow for the vibrant woman swallowed by illness, for the friend and mother figure I'd lost. But beneath that, coiling like a cold snake, was another kind of grief, for myself, for the life I'd let atrophy, for the marriage that had died long before the papers were signed. The two griefs warred within me, leaving me numb and disconnected. Chase, meanwhile, treated the house like a hotel he was impatient to check out of. His mourning period lasted precisely as long as the post-funeral reception. By the following Tuesday, he was back to late nights, the smell of someone else's perfume clinging to his clothes with a mocking tenacity. He'd made his decision. He was just waiting for the formalities to catch up. The formal talk came on a rainy Thursday evening. I was in the kitchen, mechanically washing the single plate and coffee mug I'd used. The domestic chore felt absurd, a pantomime of a life that no longer existed. Chase came in, shrugging off a sleek, expensive raincoat I hadn't seen before. He looked energized, almost buzzing, a stark contrast to the funereal gloom that clung to me. "We need to talk," he announced, his voice carrying a faux gravity that set my teeth on edge. He didn't sit. He remained standing, a CEO about to deliver a restructuring plan. In the living room, I dried my hands slowly, buying time, my heart beginning a dull, heavy thud against my ribs. This is it. The thought was clear and cold. I followed him, feeling like a prisoner walking to a sentence I already knew. He didn't beat around the bush. "Lila, this situation, it's unsustainable." He gestured vaguely, encompassing the house, me. The last 6 years, we're roommates, worse than roommates. We're caretaker and beneficiary. There's no marriage here. I stood by the fireplace, the cold marble at my back. My mother died 3 weeks ago. Chase, the words came out flat, stripped of emotion. I was too tired for hysterics. "And I'm sorry about that," he said, and he almost sounded like he meant it. For a second, truly. But her passing, it highlights the reality, doesn't it? This chapter is closed. The reason we've been living like this, it's gone. And what's left? He spread his hands, a picture of reasonable bewilderment. You and me, two strangers who share a mailing address and a lot of bad memories. Strangers, the word was a slap. I looked at him, the perfectly styled hair, the confident set of his shoulders, the utter lack of anything resembling guilt or pain in his face. Who was this man? The boy I'd married had been selfish. Yes, but there'd been a charm, a lazy affection. This man was carved from ice. Eleanor's words came back to me. He doesn't know how to love. He takes that he'd taken my youth, my devotion, my labor, and now he was discarding the empty wrapper. "What are you saying?" I asked, though I knew I needed to hear him say it. I needed the full, unvarnished cruelty of it. I want a divorce. The word hung in the air, stark and final. It's the only sensible thing. We've grown apart. We want different things. It's irreconcilable differences. He said the legal phrase with a practiced ease that told me he'd been rehearsing this. He'd probably looked it up. My eyes flickered past him, drawn to movement in the shadowed hallway. Hank stood there, a silent silhouette, one hand braced against the doorframe. He'd heard. Our eyes met. In his, I saw a world of pain, an ocean of apology, but also a terrifying, immovable resolve. He didn't move. He didn't come to my defense. He just watched. A fissure of pure panic cracked through my numbness. Hank was my last tether, the only witness to the truth of the last 6 years. If he abandoned me now, I was lost. Hank? The name was a plea, torn from a place of raw, childlike fear. Please? Chase turned, slightly annoyed at the interruption, then shrugged as if his father's presence was an irrelevance. Hank's gaze shifted from me to his son, and back to me. The silence stretched, thick enough to choke on. His jaw worked, the muscles in his lean face taut. When he finally spoke, his voice was a dry leaf scraping on stone, every word seeming to cost him dearly. "It's between you two," he said, and the words weren't just a statement, they were a verdict, a life sentence. Then, moving as if he carried the weight of the house on his back, he turned and walked slowly, deliberately, down the hall towards the garage, towards the sanctuary of his workshop and the scent of cut wood. The sound of the door closing was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It was the sound of a vault ceiling. The last of my hope bled out, leaving me cold and empty. Chase let out a small, satisfied breath, as if a minor obstacle had been cleared. See, even he knows it's over. It's for the best. Lila, clean break. We can both move on. Move on. Tio, what? My life was this house, the care schedule, the ghost of his mother. My resume had a 6-year gap labeled family caregiver. My friends had drifted away, unable to handle the constant crisis. My family was gone. I had nowhere to move on to. "You're leaving me," I repeated, the reality settling into my bones like a terminal chill. "Now, after everything, I'm freeing us both." He insisted, his tone shifting to one of paternal concern. It was nauseating. "Look, I've already talked to a lawyer. I'll be fair. You can stay here until everything's finalized. I've got a place lined up in Midtown. A fresh start, the planning, the cold, efficient forethought." While I'd been spoon-feeding his mother, while I'd been holding her hand as she took her last breath, he'd been viewing apartments, consulting attorneys. He'd been waiting for her to die so he could be free. A strange calm descended over me. The grief, the fear, the betrayal that they were still there, but they were locked behind a wall of ice. There was no point in fighting. The war was over, and I hadn't even known I was on the battlefield. I was a non-combatant, collateral damage. "Okay," I heard myself say. The word was flat, dead. He blinked, surprised. Then a look of profound relief smoothed his features. He'd expected tears, drama, bargaining. My acquiescence was a gift. "Okay, good. That's mature of you. It's for the best." He took a step towards me, as if to offer a conciliatory pat, then thought better of it, his hand falling back to his side. "I'll have my lawyer, Mark Pierce, draw up the papers. He's excellent. He'll make it painless." Painless that I almost laughed. He walked out of the living room, and a moment later, I heard the soft, jaunty whistle he reserved for when he was particularly pleased with himself. It was the whistle he'd used when he closed his first big deal. I stood there, in the beautiful, silent room his mother had decorated with so much love, and I felt the final, absolute truth settle into me. I had never known him at all. The envelope from Markham Pierce. Family law arrived 2 days later. I took it to the dining room table, the same polished oak where we'd celebrated birthdays, where Eleanor had painstakingly guided my hands through her famous pecan pie recipe. Now, it was a negotiating table. The cover letter was cordial, professional. The attached settlement agreement was a clinical dissection of a failed life. I was the respondent. Chase was the petitioner. Our marriage was the union. My 6 years of caregiving were the respondent's voluntary non-remunerative occupation during the marital period. He was offering a lump sum equitable distribution payment from our joint savings. The number made me blink. It was enough for maybe a year of very frugal living. If I found a cheap apartment and a job immediately. In return, I waived all claims to his 401k, his stock portfolio, the premarital vehicle, the Jaguar he'd inherited from an uncle and barely drove, and any future marital support. A separate addendum listed personal property to be retained by the petitioner. It included the silverware, the Reed Barton Sterling silver flatware, a wedding gift from Hank and Eleanor, the set we'd used exactly twice. Hank came in, pouring himself a coffee. He'd been even quieter than usual, a brooding, watchful presence. He sent the papers? He asked, his voice rough. I nodded, pushing the stack towards him. He wants the silverware. Hank didn't touch the papers. He just stared at the addendum as if it were a poisonous insect. My mother's pattern. He said softly. Ellie loved it. He looked up at me, his blue eyes like chips of winter sky. What are you going to do? What can I do? The helplessness was a bitter taste in my mouth. My lawyer, the court-appointed one. She says it's a starting point. But Chase has a shark. I have a goldfish, a very tired goldfish. Brenda Haggerty, you know her? Know of her. Overworked. Not a fighter. He took a long sip of coffee. You need to be your own fighter now. Lila. How? The word was a plea. I have no money, no job, no recent skills. He has everything. He's offering me the crumbs from a table I helped set. And he's taking the whole damn tablecloth with him when he goes. Hank was silent for a long moment. Some roads, he finally said, repeating his maddening proverb. You have to walk alone before you see the path. He's showing you who he is. Believe him, and let the law see it. 2. It was no help. It was philosophy when I needed cavalry. The negotiations, such as they were, took place over email and in one dismal conference room with a stained carpet. I went with Brenda. Chase brought Mark Pierce, a man with a tan that spoke of golf courses and teeth, so white they looked radioactive. He smiled a lot. It never reached his eyes. My client is being more than generous, Pierce said, steepling his fingers. Given the short duration of the marriage and the respondent's voluntary decision to leave the workforce, this lump sum represents a significant act of goodwill. The short duration was 6 years. Brenda countered, her voice firm but weary. And my client's decision to provide full-time live-in care for Mr. Mitchell's ailing mother was a mutual decision that directly enabled the petitioner to advance his career unencumbered. That has economic value. We're asking for spousal support for a period of 3 years to allow her to retrain and re-enter the job market. Pierce chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. Your client is 34, educated, and in good health. The caregiving you refer to, while commendable, was provided in the home of the petitioner's parents, who, I'm given to understand, provided all lodging and sustenance. It was, effectively, a live-in arrangement with room and board covered. The courts are unlikely to view that as a significant financial sacrifice warranting lengthy support. I sat there, my hands clenched in my lap, listening to my life, my sacrifice, be reduced to a live-in arrangement. I was the help, the unpaid, unskilled help. I looked at Chase. He was examining his manicured nails, a slight, impatient frown on his face. This was a boring business meeting to him, an impediment to his new life in Midtown. The one face-to-face meeting we had alone at the house was worse. Hank had made himself scarce, a tactic I was beginning to resent deeply. You're being unreasonable. Lila, Chase said, pacing the living room. He stopped in front of the bookshelf, his eyes scanning the titles as if looking for a particular volume. Pierce says the alimony play is a non-starter. A Hail Mary. You're just running up legal bills you can't afford. I'm trying to survive. Chase. The words burst out of me, sharp with a panic I usually kept buried. That lump sum will be gone in a year. What then? I have nothing. No recent job history. No references except for a dead woman. You can get a job, he said, as if stating the obvious. Waitressing, retail, something. It's not my fault you made unconventional career choices. Unconventional career choices. I took care of your dying mother, and we're all very grateful. He shot back, the word twisted into an insult. But gratitude doesn't pay the bills, does it? It doesn't entitle you to a share of what I've earned. Take the money. Lila, get a small apartment. Take some classes at the community college. For God's sake, dosamething. Move on. You're still young. You might even meet someone who's okay with all this. His gaze swept over me, taking in my worn jeans, my simple t-shirt, the shadows under my eyes. The unspoken words hung in the air. Someone who'll take used, damaged goods. That night, I finally broke. I stormed into the garage. Hank was at his workbench, running a plane over a long piece of cherry wood, the shavings curling onto the floor like golden ribbons. The smell of sawdust, usually comforting, now felt like an accusation of normalcy. Why won't you help me? My voice was raw, shaking with rage and hurt. You just stand there. You just watch. You know what he's doing. You know it's wrong. He's taking everything. He's erasing. After everything I did for Ellie, for you, for this family, tears of frustration streamed down my face. Why won't you stop him? You're his father. Tell him to stop being such a selfish, greedy monster. Hank set the plane down with deliberate care. He didn't look at me at first. He picked up a shaving, rubbed it between his fingers, watching it crumble. When he finally met my eyes, the pain in his was so profound it momentarily stole my breath. It wasn't the pain of a man being accused. It was the pain of a man carrying a terrible, necessary secret. Lila, he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. Do you think I don't see it? Do you think my heart isn't breaking for you? For the woman my son has become? He took a step closer, and I could see the fine tremor in his hands. But if I step in now, if I open my mouth and tell him what a selfish, greedy monster he is, what happens? He gets angry. He throws a fit. Then he takes the money, the house he thinks is his, and he walks away, still believing the world owes him. He learns nothing. And you? He shook his head, his gaze holding mine with an intensity that was almost frightening. You get a temporary reprieve, paid for by my guilt. You don't get justice. You don't get what you've earned. You get charity. And you, of all people, deserve so much more than charity. What I deserve is to not be homeless. I cried. What I deserve is for someone, anyone, to stand up and say this is wrong. The law will say it's wrong. Hank said, his voice dropping to a fierce whisper. But the law needs to see the truth. The whole, ugly, unvarnished truth. It needs to see him, not the son arguing with his dad, but the man, on his own, showing the world exactly who he is. My interference would only cloud that. It would just be Daddy bailing him out again, or Daddy picking a side. He reached out, his calloused hand hovering near my arm before he let it fall. This road, you have to walk it. He has to walk it, alone. So the destination is clear to everyone, especially to him. It was the most he'd ever said to me about it, and it made a terrible, twisted sense. He wasn't abandoning me. He was forcing a trial by fire. For both of us, the thought was cold comfort. I wanted a shield, not a lesson in brutal philosophy. So I'm just supposed to let him destroy me? For the sake of a lesson? No, Hank said, and for the first time, a flicker of something else, steel. Determination that's shown in his eyes. You're supposed to survive him, and then you're supposed to watch him fall. And when he hits the ground, Lila, You're going to be standing on rock, not sand. I promise you that. The words were cryptic, infuriating, but they were also the first hint of a lifeline, a suggestion that he saw an endgame I couldn't fathom. I left the garage more confused than ever, but the hysterical panic had receded, replaced by a grim, cold determination. If this was the road, I would walk it, and I would watch Chase. I would remember every cut, every paper-thin slice of his dismissal. The final court date was a formality. The judge, a woman with a weary, no-nonsense face, listened to Brenda's plea for rehabilitative alimony. She listened to Mark Pierce's smooth rebuttal about my voluntary non-participation in the workforce and my youth and earning potential. She looked at the numbers, at the duration, at the lack of children. Her gavel fell with a sound like a coffin lid closing. Given the circumstances, the court finds the proposed lump sum division to be equitable. Petition for spousal support is denied. The divorce is granted. Equitable. The word echoed in the marble hallway as I walked out. Chase was ahead of me, already on his phone. Yeah, it's done, he was saying, a smile in his voice. Clean break. Yeah, celebrate tonight. Absolutely. He hung up, saw me, and gave me a tight, dismissive nod. Like I said, Lila, take care of yourself. He turned and walked away, his steps light, towards the parking garage and his shiny, waiting car. I stood on the courthouse steps, the Georgia sun warm on my skin, feeling frozen to the core. The final decree in my hand was just a piece of paper, but it felt like an eviction notice for my own life. Brenda patted my shoulder. I'm sorry, Lila. The system, it's not built for cases like yours. You'll be okay. You're stronger than you think. I didn't feel strong. I felt erased. I took a cab back to the house, Hank's house. My suitcase, the one I'd brought here 6 years ago with so much hope, was open on the bed. I started packing, not the nice things, the things Chase and I had bought together, just my old clothes, the few books that were mine, the cheap jewelry from my mother. I packed the pearl necklace from Hank and Eleanor. I held it for a long moment. The cool beads a tangible link to the only love in this mess that had felt real. Downstairs, the television murmured. The world was moving on. I zipped the suitcase closed. The sound was definitive. It was the sound of a door slamming shut, of a road ending in a barren, empty field. Hank's promise felt like a mirage, a cruel joke. All I could see was the empty road ahead, and I was utterly, terrifyingly alone on it. The morning after the divorce was final. The silence in the house felt different. It wasn't the heavy, grieving silence that had followed Eleanor's death, or the tense, waiting silence of the legal proceedings. This was the hollow, empty silence of aftermath. I was a ghost in a museum of a life that was no longer mine. My packed suitcase stood by the bedroom door like a tombstone. I was in the kitchen, forcing down a piece of toast I couldn't taste. When Hank came in, he was dressed in a pressed button-down shirt and trousers, not his usual flannel and work pants. He looked older, more fragile, but there was a resolved set to his shoulders. Lila, he said, his voice unusually formal, I need you to stay this morning. Chase is coming over at 10. A cold dread settled in my stomach. Why? Hank, I can't see him. Not again. It's done. I'm leaving this afternoon. Sarah's expecting me. Please, he said, and the word held a weight I'd never heard from him before. It wasn't a request, it was an appeal. Just this one last thing. For me, for Ellie. The invocation of Eleanor's name disarmed me. I nodded, a tight, miserable jerk of my head. Fine, but I'm not talking to him. You won't have to, Hank said, his eyes holding mine with that unsettling intensity from the garage. Just be present. At 10 o'clock sharp, Chase's BMW purred into the driveway. He strode in through the front door without knocking, his key still on his ring. I noticed. He looked energized, impatient. He'd gotten a haircut. He was wearing a new watch. You wanted to see me. Dad, I'm kinda slammed at work. Big quarter coming up, he said, barely glancing at me as he entered the living room. He saw my suitcase by the stairs and a faint, smug smile touched his lips. Moving day. Huh. Fresh start. Good for you. Lila. I said nothing. I stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, a sentinel of my own ruin. Hank didn't sit. He stood before the mantel, under which were framed photos of him and Eleanor, of Chase as a boy, of a family that no longer existed. He had a simple, legal-sized manila envelope in his hands. Have a seat. Chase, Hank said, his voice calm, even. Chase sighed, the put-upon sun, but sank into the leather armchair. What's this about? If it's about the house. The realtor said we could list it in the spring. Get top dollar. The market's hot in Dunwoody. Or, if you want to stay, we can talk about a buyout from my share of the... It's not about selling the house. Hank interrupted. His tone wasn't harsh, but it carried a finality that stopped Chase mid-sentence. Hank looked at me, then back at his son. Your mother and I had a lot of time to talk these last few years. Time to think, to watch, to see what really matters. Chase shifted, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Okay? We saw loyalty. Hank continued, as if Chase hadn't spoken. We saw selflessness. We saw a strength and a kindness that had nothing to do with blood, and everything to do with character. He held up the envelope. A few weeks before she passed, Ellie and I sat with our attorney. We made some changes. Final changes. He opened the envelope and pulled out a sheaf of papers. He didn't hand them to Chase. He held them, a quiet, undeniable authority in his stance. This is my last will and testament. It's been filed, notarized, and witnessed. It is, as they say, ironclad. Chase's uneasy smile returned. Forced. Dad, come on. This is morbid. You're in perfect health. Let's not. Let's, Hank said, and the single word cut through the air. He began to read, his voice steady, each syllable dropping into the quiet room like a stone into a still pond. I, Henry Joseph Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, hereby revoke all prior wills and codicils, after the payment of my just debts, funeral expenses, and estate taxes, I give, devise, and bequeath all of my property and assets, both real and personal, of whatever kind and wherever situated, to Lila and Mitchell, formerly Lila and Sawyer, who has shown me and my beloved wife, Eleanor, the devotion of a true daughter. He continued, but the words after to Lila and Mitchell became a roaring in my ears. The room tilted. I gripped the mantelpiece to keep from swaying. I saw Chase's face, the smugness melting into confusion, then disbelief, then a dawning, horror-struck comprehension. The aforementioned property includes, but is not limited to, Hank read on, the primary residence located at 1821 Laurel Ridge Drive, Dunwoody, Georgia, all associated financial holdings including, but not limited to accounts with Fidelity Investments, Charles Schwab, and First Georgia Bank. The proceeds of my life insurance policy and my personal effects, including the 1969 Ford Mustang Shelby GT 500, currently housed in the garage. No, Chase whispered. Then, louder, no, this is a joke. This is some fucked up lesson. This isn't funny. Dad, Hank didn't look up. To my son, Chase Robert Mitchell. He read, his voice gaining a harder edge. I leave my personal Rolex watch, in the hope that it may remind him that time is the one commodity we can never earn more of. And my sincere wish that he finds the moral compass he has so carelessly misplaced. The silence that followed was absolute, a physical thing pressing in on us. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All of it? The house? The investments? The car? It was impossible. A dream. A cruel, beautiful, impossible dream. Chase was on his feet, his face mottled red and white. What the hell is this? The scream tore from his throat, raw and guttural. He lunged forward as if to snatch the papers. But Hank, deceptively quick, moved them out of reach. It's my will, son, mine and your mother's. She signed it, too. She knew. She agreed with every word. You can't do this. Chase shrieked, spittle flying. I'm your son, your blood. She's nothing. A gold-digging nurse you paid in room and board. He whirled on me, his finger a quivering spear. You did this. You poisoned them against me. You pathetic, manipulative bitch. You saw a meal ticket and you latched on. His words, so vile, so predictable, broke the spell of my shock. A cold, clear anger rose in me, sharp and clean. I met his gaze and didn't flinch. Hank took a step between us, his posture rigid with a lifetime of suppressed fury finally unleashed. I did this, he said, his voice a low, dangerous thunder. Your mother agreed. Every single word. And you will not speak to her that way in her house. Her house? Chase laughed, a wild, hysterical sound. This is MY house. My inheritance. It's always been mine. You can't just give it to this stranger, because she wiped Mom's ass for a few years. 6 years. Hank corrected, ice cold. 6 years of love and labor you couldn't be bothered to give. You saw it as a burden. We saw it as grace. The law sees this as our right to dispose of our property as we see fit. To the person who valued it, and you asked AS more than a future bank account. I'll fight this. Chase roared, his composure utterly shattered. He was a toddler in a man's body, having a tantrum. I'll get a lawyer. I'll contest it. I'll have it thrown out. You're not in your right mind. She's coerced you. Undue influence. That's what it is. Hank actually smiled, a thin, grim curve of his lips. He pulled another document from the envelope, a psychiatric evaluation, conducted the same day, by Dr. Armand Chin, declaring me of perfectly sound mind, and a notarized affidavit from our attorney, Benjamin Cross, attesting that Lila was not present during any of our meetings, and that the idea and the insistence came solely from me and your mother. He took a step closer to his son, and for the first time, Chase took a step back. You can contest it. Chase, you'll lose, and you'll spend every last cent you have trying, which, from what I understand, isn't much. The color drained from Chase's face. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've had a long time to watch. 2, Hank said, his voice dropping to a conversational tone that was somehow more terrifying than his shout. I've seen the credit card statements you thought I didn't know about. The car payments on a salary that shouldn't allow them. The new apartment in Midtown with the concierge and the rooftop pool. You've been spending your inheritance before I was cold. Son, living on the promise of a tomorrow you didn't earn. Hank's gaze was pitiless. The joint accounts I had with your mother, the ones you had signing authority on for emergencies, closed as of this morning. The line of credit you had with the bank, co-signed by me, revoked. Chase looked as if he'd been physically struck. He stumbled back, bracing himself on the back of the armchair. You can't. I already have, Hank said. He turned to me, and his expression softened. Just a fraction. Lila, the deed to this house was transferred into a joint tenancy with rights of survivorship between you and me. Effective last month. Benjamin Cross has the papers. This is your home, for as long as you want it. The finality of it, the sheer, breathtaking completeness of the trap that had been sprung. I looked at Chase. The rage was gone, replaced by a blanched, panicked terror. The reality was crashing down on him. The apartment lease he couldn't afford, the car payment, the credit card debt, the lifestyle that was a house of cards built on the foundation of an inheritance that was now smoke. You can't do this to me, he whispered, the fight gone out of him, replaced by a pathetic whine. I'm your son, your only son. You're leaving me with nothing. A watch? I'm leaving you with exactly what you've earned. Hank said, and for the first time, a profound, bottomless sadness broke through the sternness in his voice. I'm leaving you with the consequences of your choices. Maybe, from rock bottom, you'll finally learn to look up. Chase's eyes darted to me, wild, calculating. Lila, come on. You don't want this. This is crazy. This house. The money, it's too much. It's a burden. We can split it. 60 to 40. Number 70 to 30 in your favor. Be reasonable. I stared at him, the man who had called me a glorified nurse, who had bargained over silverware, who had checked his stock portfolio at his mother's funeral, the man who had looked at my 6 years of devotion and seen only a debt he was glad to be rid of. The cold, clear anger crystallized into something harder, absolute, unshakable certainty. Get out. Chase, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You heard her, Hank said. He walked to the front door and opened it. The sunny Georgia morning streamed in, a shocking contrast to the darkness in the room. You're not welcome here anymore. Chase looked from his father to me, his face a mask of utter, incomprehensible loss. He wasn't grieving for a father or a family. He was grieving for a future that had just been vaporized. He opened his mouth, closed it, and with a last, inarticulate sound of fury and despair, he shoved past Hank and stumbled out the door. We heard his car start, the engine revving violently, the screech of tires as he peeled out of the driveway. And then, silence, a different silence, the silence after a storm. I looked at Hank. My legs gave way, and I sank onto the sofa, trembling violently. The weight of it awed at the shock, the vindication, the sheer, staggering magnitude of what he'd done that crashed over me. Hank closed the door softly and walked over. He didn't sit. He just stood before me, looking older and wearier than I'd ever seen him. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Sorry you had to go through that. Sorry, I had to let you go through the rest of it. But I needed him to show his hand to the world. I needed it to be undeniable. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and silent, all of it. Hank, the house, everything. I can't. I don't. You can, he said, his voice firm. And you will. It's not a gift, Lila. It's a transfer of stewardship. Ellie and I were trusting you with what we built, because you're the only one who ever understood what it was for. He paused, his own eyes glistening. It's for a life, a good one, the one you deserve, not the one you were left with. He placed the will, the deed, the financial papers on the coffee table in front of me. They were just paper, but they were also a key, a shield, a future I had never dared to imagine. The road's different now, Hank said, a faint, tired smile touching his lips. Your road, and I'll be right here, for as long as I can, to help you read the map. Outside, the world went on, oblivious to the earthquake that had just leveled one man's world and rebuilt another's from the ground up. Inside, I sat amidst the ruins and the beginnings, and for the first time in 6 years, I took a breath that didn't hurt. It was the breath of a woman who was no longer drowning. It was the first breath of a new, uncharted, and terrifyingly free life. The first few days after Hank's detonation of our world were surreal. I wandered the halls of the big house on Laurel Ridge Drive like a sleepwalker, half convinced I'd wake up. The silence wasn't just the absence of Chase's complaints or the hum of medical equipment. It was the silence of staggering, disorienting possibility. Her house, Hank had said. This is your home, the words echoed. Too large to hold. Guilt was my first, unwelcome tenant. It gnawed at the edges of the shock. I'd find myself staring at a photo of a young Chase on Hank's shoulders, his grin gap-toothed and carefree, and a sick feeling would twist in my gut. Had we had Hank been too cruel? Had we created a monster only to destroy him? But then I'd remember the cold click of the divorce papers, the way he'd bargained for silverware while I was still smelling of antiseptic and grief, the sheer, dehumanizing calculation of it all. The guilt would harden into a colder, firmer resolve. This wasn't cruelty. It was consequence. Hank had forced the ledger to balance. The balance, of course, was not to Chase's liking. His first call came on the third day. I saw his name flash on my screen, a relic from a past life. My finger hovered over the decline button, but a new, unfamiliar impulse, a blend of anger and a need to witness his unraveling, that made me answer. Lila. His voice was strained, an attempt at calm that immediately cracked. We need to talk. In person. This is insane. There's nothing to talk about. Chase, your father was very clear. He's not in his right mind. The panic bled through. You know that. The grief. The stress. That woman has him bamboozled. We need to get him reevaluated. I've already called a lawyer. A good one. And he says we have a case for undue influence. But it'll be messy. Expensive. For everyone. I walked to the kitchen window, looking out at Hank's meticulously tended backyard. Is that a threat? Chase, it's reality. He snapped, the facade gone. Look, I'm being pragmatic. Let's avoid a long, ugly court battle that'll just eat up the estate in legal fees. We settle. Now, you take the house. Okay, you can have the damn house. But the investments, the liquid assets, those should go to me. That's fair. That's blood. You get a roof over your head. I get what's rightfully mine. We go to Dad together. Tell him this is the sensible solution. I almost laughed. The arrogance was breathtaking. Even now, cornered, he was trying to deal, to settle, offering me what was already irrevocably mine in exchange for the rest. He still saw me as a negotiating partner, a lesser one. The house was never yours to give. Chase, I said, my voice quiet, and the will is very clear. There's no we to go to your father. Goodbye. Lila, wait, don't you hang up on me. You listen to. I ended the call and blocked his number. The action sent small, sharp thrill through me. It was the first concrete thing I'd done in my new life. I'd said no. He didn't stay blocked for long. He called from other numbers. He texted. The messages evolved through the stages of his grief. Anger. You thieving bitch. You won't get away with this. Bargaining. 60 to 40 on the investments. Final offer. Don't be a fool. Desperation. Lila, please. The apartment. I can't make rent. Just a loan. Until I get on my feet. I showed the text to Hank one evening as we ate a quiet dinner. He read them, his face a stoic mask, and pushed his phone across the table to me. On the screen was an email from Chase. The subject line, family urgent. Dad, I don't know what she's told you, but you're making a catastrophic mistake. I am your son, your flesh and blood. This will tear our family apart forever. Is that what Mom would have wanted? For you to choose a stranger over me? I'm struggling. The rent here is astronomical, and with the accounts frozen, I have nothing. This is cruel. Please, call me. Let's talk like men. We can fix this. Chase, Hank's hand, speckled with age and grease from the garage, was steady as he took the phone back. He still doesn't see it, he said, not with anger, but with a profound, weary sadness. It's not me choosing you over him. It's the universe choosing decency over entitlement. And he still thinks it's a negotiation. He's going to keep coming. I said, the old fear rising. He's not going to just disappear. No, Hank agreed. He's not, which is why tomorrow we're going to see Ben Cross, and then we're going to the county courthouse. Ben Cross, Hank's attorney, was a man in his 60s with the calm, unhurried demeanor of someone who has seen every flavor of human folly. His office was warm wood and leather, not chrome and glass like Mark Pierce's. Harassment is the next logical step for someone like Chase, Ben said, steepling his fingers. He feels wronged, and he has no legal recourse. The will is, frankly, bulletproof. Hank and Eleanor were meticulous, so he'll resort to pressure. intimidation. He'll try to make your life difficult until you see reason and give him money. What can we do? I asked, we feeling strange and powerful. We document everything. Ben said, every call, every text, every email. We send him a formal cease and desist letter on my firm's letterhead. And if he shows up at the house, he looked at me. You call the police. Immediately. You do not engage. You tell them a man you have a restraining order against is trespassing and causing a disturbance. I don't have a restraining order. I said, you will by this afternoon. Hank said, his voice leaving no room for argument. The process at the courthouse was bureaucratic and cold. But Hank's presence was a solid rock beside me. Filing the petition for a temporary protective order required me to list the incidents, to print out Chase's texts, to describe the fear. He is financially desperate and feels entitled to property that is now mine. He has made threatening communications, and I believe he is capable of escalating. Writing the words made it real. I wasn't just a victim of a bad marriage. I was a property owner protecting her assets and her peace. The shift in identity was dizzying. The order was granted, temporary for now, with a hearing date set. We had the papers served at Chase's Midtown apartment. His response was volcanic and predictable. 2 days later, his BMW screeched to a halt in the driveway at dusk. I was in the kitchen. Hank was in the garage. I saw him through the window, storming up the walk, his face a contorted mask of rage. My heart hammered, but the fear was now laced with a new, steely thread of resolve. I didn't run. I walked to the front door, but didn't open it. I stood behind the sturdy oak, the temporary restraining order a flimsy piece of paper in my hand, and I watched him through the side light. He pounded on the door. Lila, open this goddamn door. I know you're in there. You and my father. You can't do this to me. I remained silent. I picked up the cordless phone Hank kept in the hall and dialed 911. My voice was remarkably calm. Yes, I'd like to report a trespasser and a violation of a temporary protective order. 1821 Laurel Ridge Drive. He's pounding on the door right now. Chase was screaming now, his fists beating a frantic rhythm. You think a piece of paper can keep me out of my own house? This is my house. The garage door opener hummed. Hank walked out, not from the garage interior, but from the side yard. He held along, heavy wrench loosely at his side. He didn't rush. He just walked towards the commotion on his front porch. That's far enough. Son, Hank said, his voice cutting through Chase's tirade. Chase whirled. You did this. You put her up to this. Having me served? A restraining order? Are you insane? You're violating a court order. Chase, Hank said, as if stating the weather. The police are on their way. I'd suggest you leave. I'm not leaving until I get what's mine. Chase shouted, spittle flying. He took a step towards his father, and Hank, without a word, shifted his grip on the wrench. It wasn't a threatening move, just a preparation. The sight of it got his own father ready to defend this house. This woman, against him, seemed to finally pierce the fog of Chase's entitlement. He staggered back a step, his eyes wide with a new kind of horror. That's when the sirens became distinct. The blue and red lights painting the quiet suburban street in pulses of alarm. Chase looked from Hank to the approaching cruisers, to the door behind which I stood. The fight drained out of him, replaced by the panicked calculation of a cornered animal. He pointed a shaking finger at Hank. This isn't over. You've destroyed this family. You remember that. He ran to his car, peeling away just as the first police car pulled up. Hank spoke to the officers, calm, authoritative, showing them the order. I opened the door and gave my statement, my hand steady. The officers were professional, sympathetic. One took the incident number for the report I'd need for the permanent order hearing. After they left, the quiet returned. Hank leaned the wrench against the doorframe and looked at me. You okay? I took a deep, shuddering breath. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me shaky but clear-headed. Yeah, I am. And I realized, with some surprise, that it was true. I hadn't cowered. I hadn't pleaded. I had protected what was mine. Thank you, I added, the words inadequate. Don't thank me, he said, his eyes tired. I just handed you the tools. You're the one who had to use them. He nodded towards the house. Now, we have other business. The other business was my education. Hank, it turned out, was a meticulous planner. The following week, he laid out a different kind of document on the dining table. Not a will, but a roadmap. The money, he said, tapping a statement from Fidelity. It's not for sitting on. It's not for buying fancy cars. It's a tool, and tools need to be understood. He began, patiently, to explain what he had: a diversified portfolio, bonds, a managed pension, the life insurance that was now in a trust for me, the house, paid off since 1998. This is your foundation, he said. It means you don't have to take the first terrible job that comes along. It means you have time to build something that matters to you. I don't know what that is anymore, I admitted, overwhelmed. Then we find out, he said simply. He pushed a brochure for Georgia State University's Perimeter College across the table. They have a graphic design program. You were good at that before, or business, or nursing, or underwater basket weaving. You take a class, see what fits. I enrolled in 2 classes, Introduction to Digital Design and Accounting 101, the first day on campus, surrounded by kids a decade younger than me. I felt like an imposter, but I opened the textbook, and the smell of new paper, the promise of learning something that had nothing to do with bed sores or medication schedules, was intoxicating. Meanwhile, Chase's life entered its death spiral. I heard bits and pieces, mostly from Hank, who still had a few old friends who felt compelled to report the tragedy. Chase had been fired, not directly because of the legal trouble, but because his performance, always coasting on charm, had collapsed under the weight of his financial panic and raging entitlement. He lost the Midtown apartment. The Jaguar was repossessed. He was reportedly couch surfing with a series of increasingly annoyed friends. His story of the gold digger and the senile father wearing thin. He made one last, desperate attempt. He caught Hank alone, getting out of his truck at the hardware store. I heard about it that evening. He looked rough, Hank said, staring into his after-dinner coffee. Thinner, desperate, not angry anymore, just broken. What did he want? I asked, a hollow feeling in my chest. What he's always wanted, a bailout. But this time, he didn't even ask for the inheritance. He asked for a loan, just enough to get a studio and a used Civic. Dad, I'll pay you back. I'll get a job, a real one. Hank's voice was flat. He said he'd go to therapy, that he'd seen the error of his ways. Did you believe him? Hank was silent for a long time. I believed he was desperate. He said finally, I didn't believe he was changed. Change doesn't come from hitting bottom. It comes from the climb back up. He just wanted me to lift him off the bottom and put him back on level ground, so he could go back to being the man he was. He looked at me, his gaze clear and unbearably sad. I told him no. I told him the only person who could give him what he needed was himself, and that I'd be proud to see him try. I imagined the scene. The proud, broken man begging, the weary, heartbroken father refusing. It was a tragedy, but not one I had written. Chase had authored every line himself. A few weeks later, I came home from class to find Hank on the back porch, in the swing he'd built for Eleanor. The setting sun cast long shadows. He had a folder in his lap. Sit, he said. I sat beside him. The swing moved gently. I got a call from Ben Cross today, he said, not looking at me. Chase has retained a new lawyer, a bottom feeder named Rossi. They're dropping the contest of the will. The news should have felt like victory. It just felt sad. Why? Because Rossi isn't an idiot. He saw the paperwork. the psychiatric eval, the affidavits. He knows it's a loser. He told Chase he'd take the case on a contingency, a percentage of what he could recover. After reviewing it, he told Chase he wouldn't recover a dime, and to walk away before he accrued more debt. Hank finally looked at me. It's over. Lila. Legally. Finally over. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The last loose thread. Snipped. Hank opened the folder. It wasn't legal documents. It was sketches. Architectural drawings. This house is too big for an old man, he said, and it's got too many ghosts for a young woman starting over. I've been talking to a contractor. We can convert the walkout basement into a proper in-law suite. Full kitchen, bedroom, living room, private entrance. For me, he pointed to the main floor plans. And up here, this could be your studio. This wall comes down, opens it all up. New floors, your space, for your life. Tears welled in my eyes. He wasn't just giving me a house. He was building us a new one. Together, a partnership, a chosen family. Hank, I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me pick out the countertops. He grumbled, but his eyes were bright. And say you'll keep going to class. That design project you showed me, the logo for that bakery, it's good. Lila, it's damn good. We sat in the swinging silence as the fireflies began to blink in the gathering dusk. The old ghosts thought of Eleanor, of the marriage, of the son who was lost long before the will was read, that were still there, in the shadows, but they were quiet now. The space they left behind was no longer empty. It was filling, slowly, with the sounds of saws and studies, with the quiet rhythm of a shared, purposeful life, and with the first, fragile green shoots of a future I was finally learning to call my own. 5 years is a lifetime. It's the time it takes for a seedling to become a tree that can bear its own fruit. For me, it was the time it took to rebuild a person from the foundation up. The house on Laurel Ridge was transformed, not just physically, but in its very spirit. The main floor was now Mitchell Company, design studio, a bright, open space where I worked with 2 part-time contractors. Hank's basement suite was a cozy, masculine nest of wood, leather, and the faint, permanent scent of sawdust. We shared dinners. He puttered in the garage restoring furniture for my clients, and I dragged him to every new graphic design exhibition at the High Museum. We were a family, a small, quiet, fiercely loyal one. Hank passed in his sleep, just as Eleanor had. It was a cool spring morning. I brought his coffee down to find him in his favorite armchair, a biography of Teddy Roosevelt open on his lap, his glasses slightly askew. He looked peaceful. The sadness that washed over me was deep, but it was clean, free of the jagged edges of grief I'd known with Eleanor. This was the goodbye you prepare for, the closing of a long, well-loved book. He'd left detailed instructions, as was his way. No fuss, a small gathering. Put me next to Ellie. The funeral was held in the same quiet chapel. The crowd was small. Ben Cross, a few of Hank's old buddies from the woodworking guild, my 2 employees, Sarah, and a handful of neighbors. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and old stories. I stood at the podium, my notes shaking slightly in my hands, and looked out at the faces of my chosen family. Hank Mitchell, I began, my voice finding its strength, taught me that the strongest foundations aren't made of stone or money, but of integrity. That love is an action, not a feeling, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't a handout, but the unwavering belief that they can build their own ladder out of whatever hole they're in. I talked about his quiet humor, his steadfastness, the way he'd shown me how to read a financial statement and how to stay in oak. He wasn't my father by blood. I finished, my eyes finding Sarah's supportive smile. He was my father by choice, and I was, profoundly, his daughter. As the final hymn ended, I saw a figure slip into the back of the chapel. My breath hitched. Chase, He looked diminished, not just older. He was only 40, but weathered, eroded. His suit was cheap and slightly too large, hanging on a frame that had lost its athletic padding. His hair was thinning, his face lined with a permanent tension that had nothing to do with ambition and everything to do with survival. He looked like a photocopy of the man I'd married, faded and slightly blurred at the edges. He didn't approach me. He just stood at the back, his eyes fixed on the simple oak casket, his expression unreadable. He slipped out before the final prayer, after the brief graveside service. As people milled, sharing memories and casserole promises, he materialized beside me near Hank's old truck. I was accepting a hug from Ben Cross. "Lila," Chase said, his voice a rusty hinge of a sound. I turned, up close. The damage was worse. There was a yellowish bruise fading near his temple. His knuckles were scarred. "Chase," I said, my voice neutral. "I didn't expect to see you." "He was my father," he said, the statement defensive. "Hello." I know. A beat of awkward silence. He scuffed his worn shoe on the gravel path. "Look, I'm sorry for your loss, and I for yours." I replied, and I meant it, however monstrous he'd been. He'd lost both parents now. The son they'd hoped for had died long before, but the man standing here was still their child. He nodded, his eyes darting around, unable to meet my gaze for long. "So, I guess Ben has read the will by now." And there it was, the real reason he'd come. Not to mourn, but to conduct a final audit. The last, dying spasm of his entitlement. The pity I felt crystallized into something colder, clearer. "I'm sure Mr. Cross is handling everything according to your father's instructions," I said, turning to walk towards the car. I had no desire to do this here. Now, he fell into step beside me, a desperate energy animating him. "Lila, wait, just talk to me, please." 5 minutes, against my better judgment. I stopped. We were away from the main group, under the skeletal branches of an old oak. "Talk." He took a shaky breath. "I'm in a bad way. Lila, a real bad way. The job, it didn't work out. The place I was staying, it fell through. I'm between things." The euphemisms piled up, pathetic and transparent. "I heard people talk, about your business. The house. You're doing well. Really well." I waited. "Dad, he wouldn't have wanted this," Chase said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He wouldn't have wanted me to be like this, living in my car, hustling day labor gigs. He was trying to teach me a lesson. I get that now, and I learned it. Okay, I learned. The hard way." His eyes finally met mine, and they were wide with a hungry, pathetic hope. "But the lesson's over. He's gone. And you have everything. Everything that should have been ours." The word "ours" was the tripwire. The last vestige of any softness evaporated. "There is no ours." "Chase," I said, my voice flat, "there's what your father built, and there's what he willed, to me, unconditionally. So that's it?" He hissed, the desperation curdling into anger. "You're just going to let me rot? After everything? After 10 years together? I'm family. Lila, you ended the family." "Chase," I said, the old wound not aching anymore, just present, a scar. "You ended it the day you served me papers. Your father just made sure the assets followed the loyalty." I started walking again, decisively. He scrambled after me. "Just a loan." "Okay, not a gift. A loan. 10,000. Enough to get a studio apartment, a decent suit, a reliable used car. I can get back on my feet. I can get a real job. I'll pay you back with interest. I'll sign anything." He was panting slightly, his breath fogging in the cool air. "Come on, Lila, for old time's sake. Dad didn't want me living in a damn Honda Civic. He wouldn't." I stopped, my hand on the truck's door handle. I looked at this broken man, this ghost of a future that had never been, begging on his father's grave. Hank's words from years ago echoed. When he hits the ground, you're going to be standing on rock. I was standing on rock. Solid, unshakable rock. And from this vantage point, I could finally see not a monster, but a pitiful, failed creation. Giving him money would be like feeding a stray that would only come back hungrier, but leaving him to truly, utterly destitute. Hank's legacy wasn't about vengeance. It was about stewardship, even of the broken things. Meet me at Ben Cross's office tomorrow at 10 a.m., I said, my voice devoid of emotion. His face lit up with a grotesque, hopeful glee. You mean it? You'll help me? I mean be at Ben Cross's office at 10. I repeated. I got in the truck and drove away, leaving him standing in the cemetery, a look of confused triumph on his face. The next morning, in Ben Cross's familiar office, the air was thick with a different tension. Chase was there early, in the same ill-fitting suit, trying and failing to look confident. I sat opposite him, Ben at the head of the table. Lila has a proposal. Ben began, his tone professionally neutral. It is a one-time, final settlement. It is not a loan. It is a grant, with specific, non-negotiable conditions. Chase's eager nod was already turning wary. Okay. I slid a single sheet of paper across the polished table. This is a list of accredited trade schools in the metro area. Plumbing, electrical, HVAC, welding. 6-month to 1-year programs with high job placement rates. Chase stared at the paper as if it were written in hieroglyphics. Trade school? You pick one. I said, you enroll. I will pay the full tuition directly to the institution. Upon your enrollment, I will also pay the first and last month's rent, plus security deposit on a modest, pre-approved 1-bedroom apartment in a reasonable neighborhood, not midtown, something you can afford on a tradesman's wage. The lease will be in your name only. His face was a storm of insult and confusion. You want me to be a plumber? I want you to have a skill. I corrected. A marketable, recession-proof skill that can't be taken from you. That doesn't depend on charm or your father's name. You'll also attend a weekly financial management course for the first 3 months, paid for by the same grant. This is an insult. He sputtered, his face reddening. A handout with strings. I'm not some charity case you can rehabilitate. You're exactly a charity case. Chase, I said calmly, you're in my office begging for charity. I'm choosing the form it takes. This, I tapped the paper, is a ladder. It's the only one I'm offering. You can take it, or you can go back to your car. But if you take it, there are conditions. You complete the program. You get a job in the field. You live within the means that job provides. You have no further contact with me, ever, for any reason. This is the full and final severance of any connection between us. You sign a legally binding agreement to that effect. Ben pushed another, thicker document forward. This outlines the terms. It includes a non-disparagement clause and a permanent release of all claims, known or unknown, against Lila or Hank's estate. If you violate any term, all financial support ceases immediately, and you will be liable for repayment of all funds disbursed. Chase looked from the trade school list to the legal document, his jaw working. I could see the war inside him, the towering pride, the ingrained sense of superiority that found the very idea of manual labor beneath him, battling against the cold, hungry reality of his Civic's backseat. The pride was losing. It had been losing for years. Why? He finally asked, his voice a defeated whisper. Why not just give me the money? Or give me nothing? Why this humiliation? I leaned forward, holding his gaze. Because your father didn't leave me his wealth to hoard, or to punish you with. He left it to me because he trusted me to be a steward, to do the right thing, even when it's hard, and even for someone who doesn't deserve it. This is the right thing. It's not a gift. It's an investment in a man becoming something more than a cautionary tale. It's the last piece of your father's lesson. The climb is yours. I'm just renting you the tools. The fight left him entirely. His shoulders slumped. He stared at the list of trades. Plumber, electrician, welder. Careers built on getting dirty, on showing up, on doing the work. The absolute antithesis of everything he'd ever valued. I'll think about it, he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. The offer is on the table until Friday at 5 p.m., Ben said. After that, it's withdrawn. Permanently. Chase left without another word, the document and the list clutched in his hand. On Friday at 4:55 p.m., a fax arrived at Ben Cross's office. It was the agreement, signed by Chase Robert Mitchell. He'd checked the box for HVAC technician. A post-it note was stuck to the signature page. In Ben's handwriting, he asked if the apartment could have central air. For study purposes, a small, wry smile touched my lips. Some things never changed, but maybe, just maybe, some things could. A year later, on a bright autumn afternoon, I placed 2 bouquets of sunflowers, Eleanor's favorite, on the simple, shared headstone. Henry Hank Mitchell, beloved husband, father, friend. Eleanor Mitchell, loving wife, mother, heart of the home. I traced the letters with my finger. The studio got the Peachtree Center account. I said to the quiet air, full rebrand. It's the biggest project yet. I hired another designer. Her name is Chloe. She's fierce. I took a deep breath. And I'm seeing someone. His name is David. He's a history teacher. He thinks my vengeance inheritance story is the most American thing he's ever heard. He loves that I can use a power drill. He makes terrible puns. You'd have hated them. Hank. Ellie would have laughed. The wind rustled the leaves. A gentle, whispering sound. I knelt, brushing a bit of grass from the stone's base. I kept my promise. Hank, I'm standing on the rock. And I helped him find a tool. What he builds with it, that's up to him now. I'd heard through the sparse grapevine that Chase had completed his HVAC certification. He was working for a reputable company. He'd moved into the apartment. He was, by all accounts, showing up. It was a start. It was all I could give, and more than he deserved. The ledger, in my heart, was finally closed. I stood up, the sun warm on my shoulders. In the distance, I saw David's sensible Subaru pulling into the cemetery lane. He'd offered to come with me, but I needed to do this part alone. Now, seeing him, a feeling of profound, quiet wholeness settled over me. It wasn't the desperate, hungry need for family I'd once had. It was the calm assurance of a life built, piece by piece, with intention and love. I took one last look at the headstone. Thank you, I whispered, not for the house or the money, but for the love, the lesson, the unshakable faith that a broken thing could be made whole, and that a woman could learn to be her own harbor. Then I turned and walked towards the car, towards the man, towards the wide open future that was, at long last, unquestionably, joyfully, my own.